The war raged on a sun-baked Pacific island, the air thick with the acrid smell of gunpowder and the cacophony of distant explosions. Amidst this chaos, a group of US Marines took aim at a hulking mass of steel, a Japanese tank advancing toward their position. The deep roar of a .50 caliber machine gun filled the air, a sound that would soon mark a pivotal moment in combat history. As the bullets tore into the tank, the Marines could hardly believe their eyes as it crumpled, metal buckling and twisting under the relentless fire. How could such a powerful machine, a symbol of military strength, fall so easily? This moment encapsulates a larger paradox: the limits of technology in warfare versus the unexpected advantages of strategy and tactics. This episode isn't just about the .50 caliber machine gun. It's about the invisible forces that decide wars. In 1941, the world was engulfed in the flames of the Second World War. Nations had entrenched themselves in ideologies that shaped their military expectations and strategies. For the Japanese, armored tanks represented not only power, but also a means to secure dominance in the Pacific. Their doctrine emphasized aggressive tactics, often underestimating the capabilities of their adversaries. The Japanese believed that their tanks were nearly invincible, designed to withstand enemy fire and dominate the battlefield. Meanwhile, the United States approached warfare with an evolving mindset. After suffering initial setbacks in the Pacific, US military leaders began to adapt their tactics and equipment. They understood that firepower and mobility would be crucial in overcoming fortified positions. Manuals and doctrine from the War Department emphasized the importance of combined arms, integrating infantry, artillery, and air support to achieve victory. This was a shift from traditional views that favored static defenses and large-scale engagements. By 1943, the battle for control of the Pacific Islands intensified. The Japanese forces were confident, believing their well-constructed tanks would give them the upper hand against American troops. However, they failed to account for the innovative approaches that the US Marines were beginning to adopt. The Marines were not only equipped with advanced weaponry, but also trained to use it in dynamic ways that maximized their battlefield effectiveness. The expectations on both sides were starkly different. The Japanese troops, fortified in their belief in the superiority of their armored vehicles, did not anticipate that their enemies would possess the firepower to dismantle their machines with relative ease. This psychological barrier would prove significant as the war progressed. For the Marines, the evolving battlefield was a landscape of opportunity where they could leverage their strengths against the enemy's assumptions. In the context of this shifting battlefield, the .50 caliber machine gun emerged as a game-changer. The weapon was initially designed for anti-aircraft use, but its versatility quickly found a place on the front lines. The US military recognized that this machine gun could not only provide suppressive fire, but also penetrate the armor of enemy tanks. As the war dragged on, the Marines honed their tactics, learning how to maximize the effectiveness of their equipment. Contrary to the expectations of the Japanese forces, the US Marines were not merely foot soldiers. They were adaptable and innovative. They understood that technology alone did not guarantee victory. It was the combination of tactics, training, and morale that would ultimately define their success. The American forces began to exploit weaknesses in Japanese armor, turning the tide in battles across the Pacific. The war was not just about machines and firepower. It was about understanding the adversary's weaknesses and vulnerabilities. As the US forces engaged in combat, they learned from each encounter, adapting their strategies in response to the realities of the battlefield. This brought a newfound confidence that would become critical in the months to come. As the conflict unfolded, it became clear that the Japanese tanks, once considered formidable, were vulnerable to the .50 caliber machine gun. The psychological shock of realizing that their armored vehicles could be dismantled so easily would soon set in. altering the course of the war in the Pacific. The dynamics of warfare were evolving, and the outcome would hinge on more than just the machinery of war. The Japanese forces entered the war with an unwavering belief in their technological superiority, particularly regarding their armored vehicles. Their tanks were meticulously designed, boasting impressive armor and firepower. However, they made a crucial miscalculation. They underestimated the capabilities of American forces and the adaptability of their tactics. This blind spot would prove detrimental in numerous engagements. As the war progressed, Japanese commanders often underestimated the speed and effectiveness of U.S. weaponry. They failed to recognize that American forces were evolving rapidly, learning from their experiences in combat. The Japanese belief that their tanks were invulnerable blinded them to the changing realities of the battlefield. They did not anticipate the innovative tactics the Marines would employ to counter their advances. The cultural differences between the two forces also played a role in this blind spot. The Japanese military doctrine emphasized honor and valor, leading to a rigid approach to warfare. In contrast, American forces adopted a more flexible mindset, allowing them to adjust their tactics based on the evolving circumstances of battle. This flexibility became a critical advantage in engagements where the Japanese forces clung to outdated strategies. Moreover, the Japanese military hierarchy often hindered effective communication and adaptability. Tactical decisions were frequently made at high command levels, leaving little room for on-the-ground adjustments. This rigidity prevented Japanese commanders from recognizing the need to adapt to the American forces' strategic shifts and innovative tactics. In battles such as those on Guadalcanal and Tarawa, the Japanese forces suffered heavy losses as they encountered American tactics that exploited their weaknesses. The reliance on static defenses and the underestimation of American firepower became evident, yet the Japanese continued to fight valiantly without addressing the core issues within their strategic approach. The psychological impact of these defeats began to erode the confidence of Japanese commanders. As they observed American forces employing tactics that effectively neutralized their tanks, they struggled to reconcile their beliefs about technology with the harsh realities of combat. This disconnect between expectation and outcome became a critical factor in their later struggles. Additionally, the Japanese failure to adequately assess the capabilities of the .50 caliber machine gun played a significant role in their downfall. American forces had trained rigorously to use this weapon effectively, while Japanese commanders often dismissed its potential as a threat. This misjudgment allowed the U.S. Marines to exploit vulnerabilities in Japanese armor with devastating consequences. As the war continued, the Japanese military faced growing pressure to adapt. However, their entrenched beliefs and rigid command structures hindered their ability to respond effectively. The inability to recognize the changing dynamics of warfare became a significant liability as the conflict escalated, ultimately contributing to Japan's defeat. This blind spot in understanding the enemy's capabilities, coupled with a reliance on outdated doctrine, created a critical gap in Japanese military strategy. The inability to adapt to the realities of modern warfare would cost them dearly in the battles to come. The technological advantage that shifted the tide in the Pacific was the .50 caliber machine gun. Initially developed in the 1920s for anti-aircraft purposes, this weapon proved to be versatile and deadly against ground targets as well. Its design incorporated several key technical pillars that made it particularly effective in combat scenarios. First, the .50 caliber machine gun had a significantly higher rate of fire compared to earlier machine guns. Capable of firing up to 200 rounds per minute, its rapid output overwhelmed enemy positions. This attribute allowed U.S. Marines to suppress enemy fire effectively, creating openings for infantry advances and disrupting enemy operations. Second, The armor-piercing capabilities of the 50 caliber rounds gave American forces a distinct advantage against Japanese tanks. The rounds were designed to penetrate armor and deliver devastating impacts. This meant that the US Marines could engage armored vehicles from a distance, effectively neutralizing threats before they could reach American positions. Third, the mobility of the 50 caliber machine gun, often mounted on vehicles or tripods, allowed for flexibility on the battlefield. Marines could reposition the weapon quickly, adapting to changing combat situations. This adaptability was crucial, especially in the unpredictable terrain of the Pacific Islands, where traditional static defenses often failed. The combination of these technical features translated into practical battlefield advantages. US forces could effectively engage multiple targets, suppress enemy advances, and protect their own troops during assaults. This capability was particularly important in the chaotic environment of island-hopping campaigns, where quick decisions and adaptability were essential for survival. For Japanese forces, the absence of a comparable weapon system created a significant disadvantage. Their armored vehicles, while initially perceived as formidable, lacked the resilience to withstand the concentrated fire from American 50 caliber machine guns. This technological gap quickly became apparent during engagements where Japanese tanks were routinely outmatched. Moreover, the US military's ability to produce and deploy these weapons en masse further compounded the situation. The American industrial complex ramped up production, ensuring that Marines had access to sufficient firepower as they advanced across the Pacific. In contrast, Japanese manufacturing capabilities were strained, limiting their ability to replace damaged or destroyed vehicles. The effectiveness of the 50 caliber machine gun was not merely a result of its design, it was also a reflection of the training and tactics employed by US Marines. They learned to use the weapon in conjunction with other arms, creating a synergistic effect that enhanced their overall combat effectiveness. This integration of firepower into a cohesive strategy was a critical factor that Japanese forces failed to emulate. As the war progressed, the Japanese military attempted to counter the effectiveness of the 50 caliber machine gun by reinforcing their tank designs and strategies. However, these efforts often fell short due to their inability to adapt quickly in the face of evolving American tactics. The technological and tactical edge held by US forces became increasingly pronounced as the conflict continued. Ultimately, the 50 caliber machine gun exemplified how technology could shape the battlefield dynamics. It empowered American forces to challenge the Japanese armored vehicles that had once been seen as invincible, fundamentally altering the landscape of warfare in the Pacific. On November 20th, 1943, the battle for Tarawa began. The island, a small but strategically important outpost in the Gilbert Islands, would soon become the site of a fierce confrontation. As dawn broke, the air was thick with anticipation. US Marines landing on the beach could hear the distant rumble of artillery and the crash of waves against the shore. The Marines advanced under the cover of naval bombardment, but as they reached the beach, they faced unexpected resistance from entrenched Japanese forces. The Japanese defenders, confident in their fortified positions, opened fire on the advancing Marines. The sound of gunfire echoed across the sandy landscape, mingling with the cries of men engaged in battle. As the Marines took cover, they quickly set up their 50 caliber machine guns. The roar of the machine gun filled the air as the Marines unleashed a barrage of fire upon the Japanese positions. The bullets struck the Japanese tanks with devastating precision, tearing through armor that had once seemed impenetrable. A sense of disbelief spread among the defenders as they witnessed their tanks crumple under the relentless assault. With each burst of fire, the psychological impact on the Japanese troops became evident. They had not anticipated such firepower from the American forces. The realization that their tanks could be easily dismantled began to erode their morale. The tide of battle shifted as the Marines pressed forward, exploiting the confusion among the Japanese defenders. The battle raged on, with the sound of gunfire and explosions filling the air. The Marines advanced methodically, using their machine guns to suppress enemy fire and protect their comrades. In a particularly intense moment, a Marine crewman shouted as he reloaded his weapon, the sun reflecting off the metal of the .50 caliber gun, a stark contrast to the chaos surrounding him. The Marines' coordinated assault continued to push the Japanese forces back, their confidence bolstered by the effectiveness of their weaponry. As they captured key positions on the island, the Japanese defenders found themselves increasingly isolated, their armored vehicles rendered ineffective against the relentless American fire. The psychological shock of the battle became evident as the day wore on. Japanese soldiers, once resolute in their defense, began to falter under the pressure of sustained American fire. The realization that they could not hold their positions began to set in, leading to a breakdown in their defensive strategy. As night fell on Tarawa, the sound of gunfire began to subside. The once confident Japanese forces faced a grim reality. Their tanks were no longer symbols of strength, but reminders of their failure to adapt. The battle for Tarawa would serve as a turning point, illustrating the profound impact of the .50 caliber machine gun on the dynamics of warfare in the Pacific. In the aftermath, the Marines secured the island, marking a crucial victory. The lessons learned from Tarawa would shape future engagements as the U.S. military continued to refine its tactics and capitalize on the advantages provided by their technological edge. The arithmetic of victory in the Pacific was stark, revealing the harsh realities of wartime production and resource allocation. The U.S. military's ability to mass-produce weaponry played a significant role in determining the outcome of battles. The .50 caliber machine gun, in particular, became a symbol of American industrial efficiency. By 1943, American factories were producing approximately 30,000 .50 caliber machine guns each month. This staggering output allowed U.S. forces to equip numerous units, ensuring that Marines had the firepower needed to engage effectively in combat. In contrast, Japanese production capabilities were severely limited, hampered by resource shortages and the demands of a protracted war. The impact of this production disparity was evident on the battlefield. For every one armored vehicle the Japanese deployed, U.S. forces could field multiple .50 caliber machine guns. This ratio translated into overwhelming firepower during engagements, allowing American troops to dominate in direct confrontations. The ability to sustain fire at a high rate was a game-changer in battles such as Tarawa. Moreover, the logistical support for U.S. forces was robust, with supply lines efficiently transporting ammunition and equipment. In Tarawa, Marines could rely on a steady stream of .50 caliber ammunition, ensuring that their guns remained operational throughout the assault. This consistency in supply was a critical factor that enabled sustained operations, unlike their Japanese counterparts, who faced increasing logistical challenges. The effectiveness of the .50 caliber machine gun was further enhanced by its range and accuracy. Capable of hitting targets effectively at distances of up to 2,000 yards, the weapon allowed Marines to engage enemy forces before they could effectively retaliate. This advantage translated into a significant tactical edge, as American troops could disrupt enemy movements and fortifications. The consumption of ammunition also played a role in the arithmetic of victory. U.S. forces utilized approximately 7 million rounds of .50 caliber ammunition during the campaign in the Pacific. This staggering figure highlighted the intensity of combat and the reliance on firepower to achieve objectives. The ability to deliver such overwhelming firepower became a defining characteristic of American military operations. In contrast, Japanese forces were often unable to sustain prolonged engagements due to their limited resources. The combination of dwindling supplies and the inability to replace lost vehicles exacerbated their challenges on the battlefield. As American forces continued to press their advantage, the arithmetic of victory became increasingly evident. The effectiveness of the .50 caliber machine gun, combined with robust production capabilities, created a situation where American forces could outlast and outmaneuver their Japanese counterparts. Each engagement became a testament to the power of industrial capacity in determining the outcomes of battles. Ultimately, the numbers told a clear story. It was not merely the technology itself, but the ability to effectively produce and deploy that technology that secured victory for U.S. forces in the Pacific theater. The arithmetic of war became a decisive factor in shaping the outcome of the conflict. The systemic consequences of the U.S. victory in the Pacific were profound, reshaping military doctrine and the landscape of global warfare. The successes achieved with the .50 caliber machine gun during battles like Tarawa highlighted the importance of adaptability and innovation in military strategy. Following the war, U.S. military leaders recognized the need to incorporate lessons learned from the Pacific theater into future doctrine. The ability to integrate firepower, mobility, and combined arms became foundational to American military strategy. This shift transformed how future conflicts would be approached, emphasizing the importance of technological superiority and the ability to adapt to changing circumstances. The Japanese defeat not only marked a turning point in the war, but also led to a re-evaluation of their military doctrine. The realization that reliance on traditional armored tactics could not withstand the onslaught of modern firepower prompted significant changes in Japanese military thinking. However, the impact of these changes would not be seen until after the war, as Japan struggled to rebuild its military and economy. The post-war era also witnessed a shift in global military dynamics. The effectiveness of American forces in the Pacific solidified the United States' position as a dominant military power. The lessons learned from the Pacific Campaign informed U.S. strategies during the Cold War, emphasizing the need for technological superiority in any potential conflict. Moreover, the success of the .50 caliber machine gun became emblematic of the broader industrial capabilities of the United States. The ability to produce high-quality weaponry in large quantities set a precedent for military production in future conflicts. This industrial capacity would play a crucial role in the development of advanced weaponry in subsequent decades. As countries around the world observed the outcomes of the Pacific War, many began to reassess their military strategies and technologies. The effectiveness of American tactics inspired other nations to modernize their military forces, recognizing the importance of integrating advanced weaponry and adaptive tactics into their operations. The legacy of the Pacific Campaign extended beyond the immediate battlefield, influencing military thinking for generations to come. The emphasis on adaptability, technological superiority, and combined arms would shape the future of warfare, reflecting the lessons learned during the conflict. In the years following the war, the ramifications of the battle for Tarawa and the role of the .50 caliber machine gun continued to resonate. The systemic changes in military doctrine and strategy established a new paradigm for how nations approached warfare, setting the stage for future conflicts around the globe. Reflecting on the chaos of the Pacific theater, the question remains: how could a single machine gun alter the course of a battle? The answer reveals a deeper truth. It wasn't the best weapon that won, but the best system, one that combined technology, strategy, and adaptability. As we examine the lessons of history, another question arises: how will the evolving nature of warfare shape the next generation of military strategy?